Hello, my name is Paul Arnold, and I am a PhD candidate in religious studies at McMaster University in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. My theological puzzle is titled, What are the theological implications of understanding gestures as a fundamental part of language and thought? And the puzzle attempts to bring the modern field of gesture studies into conversation with theology. The field of gesture studies is a diverse and interdisciplinary field that includes a wide range of disciplines like psychology, cognitive linguistics, anthropology, and so on. And the research of those in the field can vary widely and include topics like everyday language use, sign languages, communication in great apes, early language development, language evolution, and so on. Despite the wide range of expertise and subjects in the field of gesture studies, the unifying thread in the field is their interest in gestures, and more specifically, how gestures relate to language and thought. Traditionally, language has been assumed to consist primarily of conventional signs or words that are either spoken audibly or written in text. Gestures, as a result, are usually thought of as an external accompaniment to language or thought, but not as part of language and thought itself. The field of gesture studies challenges some of these basic assumptions about the nature of language and thought and argues that gestures should actually be understood as being part of language and thought itself. To date, there has been very little work that has been done to explore the implications of the insights of the field of gesture studies in other fields like theology or religious studies. My theological puzzle is a preliminary effort to try to identify a few of those implications for sacramental theology. I focus on sacramental theology because gestures or intentional bodily movements play a very important role in how the sacraments are both understood and administered. One implication is that we should reconsider the nature of liturgical language and consider gestures in other multimodal aspects of language, like material things and the material environment, as being part of the content of the liturgy or the sacraments themselves. Another possible implication of the insights of the field of gesture studies for sacramental theology concerns the relationship between the visible and verbal dimensions of the sacraments. The visible and verbal dimensions of the sacraments are often thought of as being very separate or distinct from one another, and they have often been used as a representation of contrasting approaches to the sacraments in general, where some Christian traditions prioritize the visible dimension of the sacraments, whereas other traditions prioritize the verbal dimension. I think the relationship between gesture and speech and everyday language use could provide a very helpful analogy for understanding the relationship between the visible and verbal dimensions of the sacraments. Like gesture and speech, the visible and verbal dimensions of the sacraments could be understood as being in a tightly bound imagery language dialectic, as gesture researcher David McNeil puts it, and as part of a single multimodal unit and not as two separate or distinct forms of communication. These are just a couple of the potential implications of the field of gesture studies for theology, and I think these are just starting to scratch the surface. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video and to read my theological puzzle. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to get in touch with me through email. Take care.